Are you looking to purchase another home but have a home to sell? Well, in today's video, we're going to walk you through that process from the outside looking in. You might think it's a pretty simple process, right? You just put your house up for sale, and when it sells, you go and buy something else, right? Because of the current housing market that we're experiencing in the Houston, Galveston, greater Gulf Coast area, the overwhelming buyer demand and a low supply of inventory, things are moving very, very quickly in real estate. So if you're in a position where you do have to sell something in order to buy something else, it might be a little different than what you're really thinking. So today we're going to take some time and walk you through that process so that you can make informed decisions as a potential home seller and as a potential home buyer. My name is Shari Hensley and I'm a realtor living right here on the beautiful Texas Gulf Coast. There's one thing I always say on my videos, and I'm going to mention it again: real estate's local. So I'm going to be telling you what's happening in my local market here in the greater Houston, Galveston area. So your market may be a little different. If you have a lot of inventory and buyer demand is very low, it could be a little different. But when you have a lot of inventory and buyer demand is low, it could be a little easier to go through this process. But where I'm located on the Texas Gulf Coast, we have a low supply of homes, less than 2.7 months, and we have a very, very high buyer demand. We're still seeing multiple offers on move-in ready properties. So it's going to be difficult to buy and sell at the same time. Today, we're going to walk you through that process right now. So if you're someone who's looking to buy another home and you already own a property, the most ideal position to be in as a seller is to be able to buy that next property without selling the property you're in until after you purchase the next home. But the reality is that most people can't afford to do that because you have to be able to qualify for both mortgage payments. You've got to be able to qualify for the home you're in now, and you also have to be able to qualify for the home that you're buying. You also have to be able to have the down payment to purchase that new home. Now, many buyers get their down payment from the equity in their current home. So this makes it very, very difficult out there for many buyers to go through that process without selling their property. So if you're not in that position, like many people in this housing market, we're going to walk you through what your options look like right now so that you can best navigate them and put you in the best position of not only being able to sell your home, but also buy a home in this very, very busy real estate market. When it comes to selling your home, you're going to have a couple of different options. Now, I'm not going to go through all the things you need to think about when as a seller when you're selling your home, but there's a good list, and I think you should absolutely think about before you put your home on the market. But as a seller, you've got a couple of different options. Now, you can sell your house and go rent something and have that cash ready to buy the property when it becomes available. You also have the ability to sell your house and potentially rent back for a certain period of time, like maybe 30 or 60 or 90 days while you go out and find that property. But to both of those, it's going to be really tricky. What happens if the market doesn't present a property to you that you want to purchase within that lease back time frame? You may have to rent something short term and look for a property while you're renting. But what if you're looking for that property? But what if you can't find it, or you decide to sell your home and rent it back for 60 days and while you go out and look for that property? Yeah, in theory, it really sounds great. But if there's not a property out there that you want to purchase, then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. At the end of the day, when it comes time to move out of the property that you sold and you have to find another place to live, maybe you could extend the lease from a short-term rental, or maybe the seller will give you a little bit more time to rent it back. Maybe they want to move in it straight away and don't want to give you a lease back at all. If they don't, then you've got to move and make that move to another rental while again you look for another property to buy. So it's not ideal by any means to try to sell and go rent or to sell and lease back unless you already have a property identified or you're already in escrow in your current property, or you make it contingent, which is going to take us into our next option. Here, as a potential seller, now before we get into that, I want to make very clear, and that's something that's very, very important. As a potential seller that is also a buyer, it's going to be very important that you get pre-approved early in this process. Now, you might be thinking, well, why do I need to get pre-approved? I already own a house. I bought a house, of course I'm going to be able to purchase something else. Well, maybe not. You know, things change, credit scores change. Your thought of what you could afford might actually change. Interest rates change on a daily basis, and therefore you're buying a more expensive property. And in many cases, when you're selling and buying something else, interest rates change, your income changes, your debts change. All of these things affect how much you can qualify to purchase. In almost 2 decades of selling real estate, I've seen it happen. People go to sell a property and buy something else, and then they get pre-approved after they're already in the process. And they realize they can't actually afford to qualify for the home that they want to purchase. This puts them in quite a predicament of where do they go next? What do we do next? So as a buyer in this market, even though you're a seller, it's imperative that you go through that process early. Have your agent get you an estimated closing statement with the amount that they think you're going to walk away with on your current home. Then you need to decide how much of those proceeds you're going to use to purchase the next home. Then I highly recommend right now you have a conversation with the lender. The lender is going to go through that pre-approval process. They're going to make sure you're in line with what you thought. The lender, they're going to verify that you're able to qualify for the price point that you thought you could afford, and basically that you are good to go. This way, when you're making offers, you're not having to run and get pre-approved at the last minute. This is important, especially in a housing market where things are moving very, very quickly. Even though you're selling a home and buying something else, the seller on the home that you're buying is going to want to see that you're pre-approved. You're going to have to do that pre-approval process anyway. It's an imperative that you do it first and that you're not trying to play catch up at the end of the day. You really don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And by that, I mean trying to purchase a home that you really might not be able to afford. If you have a lender, fantastic. If you don't have a lender and you need a great lender anywhere in the U.S., just click on the comments below and I'll connect you with an expert, somebody that can guide you through that process. Now, earlier I was talking about buying with intention on selling your property. Now, this is what many people out there do in the market. This is what they want to do. At the moment, I'm seeing people do it wrong in many, many ways. Now, I want to talk about that first. Now, what I mean by wrong is that people have a property to sell and they want to go buy something else. But in order to buy something else, they need to sell that property. I see a lot of sellers out there just looking at houses they want to buy, and then when they reach out to their agent like me saying, "Hey Shari, I found a house I want to purchase," my first question to them is, well, do you need to sell the home you're in? And a lot of times they say, yes, I absolutely do need to sell it. Now the problem with that is it's not listed. And in order for a listing agent on the house that you want to buy to take you serious, you need to at least have your house on the market that you're selling. And in some cases, you might be able to get it done, but in most cases, you're going to need that home not only on the market, but in escrow. You need to be able to show that you're a serious buyer. So to do that, you need to show where that money's coming from. If it requires you selling your home needs to be on the market. And as I said, in most cases, be in escrow, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute when we talk about the contingency process. So if you're someone that's looking to buy, but you need to sell, make sure you're having that conversation again with your lender. When you're getting pre-approved and you're having that conversation about wanting to buy something else, this is a time where you talk to your agent up front and get their guidance on how to best do this in the environment that we're in today. Things are moving very quickly. You need to be able to put your best foot forward when making an offer, and part of that is going to have you putting your house on the market prior to actually going out there and looking for a property. So that's going to take us into this contingency idea. So when you need to sell your home to buy another, it's called being a buyer contingent upon selling your home. It's exactly what it is. In this market, the best way to approach that is to have your home at least on the market, available for sale. But in most cases, it's best to actually have that property in escrow. Having a buyer working with you with the idea that they're going to be a buyer and stay a buyer while you go out and find a replacement home. This way, you're never at risk for losing your property until you find that replacement. In past markets with lots of inventory and lower buyer demand, it's kind of been frowned upon to be seller contingent about finding a replacement home because many buyers don't want to deal with that in this environment because many buyers have not wanted to deal with it. They don't want to go into escrow on a property and then you as a seller not be able to find a replacement. There's a lot of buyers out there in this market that still feel the same way, but because there's a low supply of homes, buyers are willing to do things they've never been willing to do before, and one of those is work with sellers who need to find a replacement home. So as a seller who's also a buyer, the best spot you can be in is to have your property on the market, be contingent upon finding that replacement home, and have a buyer in escrow ready to go and actually doing their inspections and their appraisals and going through the process of getting their loan closed. So that if you do find that replacement home, you can just make an offer on that home contingent upon selling your current residence, but be able to provide proof to the listing agent that your home is actually in escrow. Then they know that the down payment that you're using to purchase that home is coming from the sale of this property, because otherwise you're not able to document that fact. Most listing agents out there aren't going to take your offer serious unless you're able to provide some documentation. Even in this environment, it's going to be tough for sellers out there to consider your offer unless you are the strongest offer in this market. You can't go with a contingent offer buying a property and try to cut corners and try to negotiate really hard $100,000 under list. When you've got a property to sell, you can negotiate, you can do certain things, but when you're competing multiple offers, you need to bring your best foot forward, and that means making the strongest offer in every way you can and probably being a little bit more aggressive in some areas because you have this other property to sell. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to not have that home on the market, go out shopping for a property, as I mentioned earlier, find a home, and then try to work your way backwards with having to go back and list it or having to go talk to your agent and saying, I'm looking at this house and now I need to sell my house. The conversation with me is going to be like, wow, not only do we need to put your house on the market, but we need to get it in escrow now. In many cases, in order for the listing agent to take that offer serious, I know there's going to be a lot going on here and it can get a little confusing with all these different scenarios I'm giving you. But what I'm trying to get at here is talk to a professional, talk to a local real estate agent. As I mentioned earlier, real estate is local. Reach out to me or my team and we'll make your sale and or purchase a smooth one. So what you want to know, how do I price my property in this market? How do I list it and contingent on me finding a replacement home? To list and buy a property might be a little different where you are, but on the Texas Gulf Coast, you're going to need to have your home on the market. You can be a contingent seller upon finding that replacement property, but you need to at least have it on the market to be able to make a competitive offer to purchase it. Now, hear me, it is probably even better if it's in escrow. The reason I'm mentioning doing a contingent sale is to avoid what I mentioned earlier, and that's where you have to either sell and rent or sell with a leaseback option where you might not find the property in the period of time that you're allotted, and you don't want to be homeless. You want to avoid having to make multiple moves in a position where you're having to make irrational decisions. So hopefully the information I'm providing here gives you some guidance that you need to be able to make those decisions. We sure appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we so appreciate your comments and likes. We really appreciate your support. Let's connect and find your Gulf Coast dream home. I'll see you on the next one.